How to Build a Multi-Billion-Dollar Business in Africa from Scratch by Strive Masewa. Compiled by Geoffrey Tengamba, being read to you by Arnold Rangakoramia. Chapter 19. Living in the Diaspora. Whatever you do, do it with dignity. You do not need to add anything to yourself. You are good enough as you are for God's purpose in your life. Focus on developing yourself in God. Even as you study and improve your skills, do it with the focus that you want to be a greater blessing to your world. Dr. Chris Oyakhilome. Running a small business in the diaspora. I have spent the greater part of my 54 years on earth living in the diaspora. I left my homeland, Zimbabwe, then the rebel colony Rhodesia for the first time when I was only 7 years old. I did not return home until I was 23 years old. I left again 15 years ago. This means I have lived in the so-called diaspora for a total of 32 years of my life. There are many reasons why people go and live in the diaspora. Sometimes it's political, as it was for me. When I was growing up, sometimes it's economic, sometimes it's professional, because your job takes you there. I know what it is to live in the diaspora. Imagine, I once carried documents which stated that I was a refugee to avoid being arbitrarily deported. It can be a fearful thing, particularly if you're living on economic margins. I'm not in that situation today, but I have an idea of it. And my heart and prayers are always with those who live in the diaspora, no matter whether they are Africans or from other nations, including those displaced by war in places like Syria, the Sahel region, and the Horn of Africa. My discussion is not about why people live in the diaspora, but about the role they play in building two nations at the same time. I also want to discuss how you can prosper and improve your situation, even whilst living and working in the diaspora. I was compelled to write about this issue after meeting two young Africans, one from Angola and another from Zimbabwe, who work in South Africa. I have often said that some of the most important qualities for running a business I learned from my mother. She was a businesswoman in the diaspora. When her family, like thousands of others, fled Ian Smith's racist supremacist government of Rhodesia in the 1960s to live in the newly independent African nation of Zambia, we were essentially refugees. Whilst we did not use the now popular term diaspora, that is what it was. The Zambians welcomed us with open arms and allowed us to work or even start small businesses to sustain our families. Then as now, locals sometimes see people coming from outside as crowding out their own opportunities for jobs and even businesses. This can lead to resentment and even outright legislative measures being put in place. If you think it is hard to raise capital or start a small business, spare a thought for those who are from other countries. For them, it's even impossible. You cannot go to even talk to a bank. Little has changed even in 40 years. Now here are some lessons I learned from my mother in those days. There is nothing gained by complaining. She never ever complained, and she never allowed us to complain, but always insisted that we show respect and gratitude to our hosts. The tent maker says, whatever is good, set your mind on that. We were taught to see good. Years later, I was to learn that she was teaching us to practice something she had been taught at mission school. It was from her that I first learned that your attitude sets your altitude. Never allow yourself to feel bitter or angry because you feel you are not being treated right by others. You must save. Because we did not have access to banks or investors, we saved everything we laid our hands on. My mother was like a little squirrel, always hiding away small amounts of money. If she made a little money, she made sure she saved as much of it as possible for a rainy day. This capacity to save money and live within one's means was always taken to the extreme in our household. When I got a scholarship to go to college, my mother told me to save some of it. She would always ask me, so how much did you save? Friends, you must develop a savings culture. Even when things are good, don't behave as though there is no tomorrow. Have the discipline to save for whatever little you get, even if it is $1. Whenever I have seen people fail in business, sadly, I usually find that they are not disciplined in this basic and foundational area of success. Saving must be a culture. Be frugal with your money. My mother would be quick to rebuke me. if I did anything that was showy or an attempt to impress others. We never owned a new car, as all our cars were bought as used cars. Years later, I discovered that the old lady could easily have bought herself a Mercedes anytime. She was just frugal. Avoid borrowing money. Relationships were incredibly precious because they were hard to come by. And one sure way of breaking a relationship is borrowing money and failing to give it back. We just never borrowed money from people. If we could not do something with what we had, we either waited until we had saved enough or we did not do it. It was that simple. If you do borrow money at some point, then be quick to give it back, but don't make borrowing a habit. Spare no effort in the education of your children. The other day I read an article in an American newspaper about Nigerians living in America. It was full of amazing statistics about how well they are educating their children. It was an amazing story and would have made us all proud, and that is how it should be. I could easily recognize that story because I saw my own upbringing. If you are living in the diaspora, spare no effort in the education of your children. Stay out of local politics and don't insult your hosts. I lived in South Africa for about 10 years before moving to London. If you go through every interview I ever gave, you will not find a single comment I ever made about local politics. It is far better to focus your attention on things like being a member of a good church which links you to others in your community, particularly one which has a lot of local members rather than just your own countrymen or other foreigners. Never stop reaching out to locals. My mother always insisted that we reach out to our local Zambian neighbors and make friends. She did not want us to just hang out with people from our own country. We were also to reach out to people of other races. Now, decades later, I find that some of my oldest and most trusted friends are Zambians I met in my childhood. Some have done rather well for themselves, I dare say. Building two nations at the same time. The study of economics is one of my personal passions. I strongly believe that many people allow themselves to be victims because they do not understand how economics actually works. Perhaps one day I will write a book about this. Anyway, here are some interesting economics. In 2014, Africans living in the diaspora sent home to their families approximately $62 billion. This money enters their various home countries as foreign exchange. In other words, it is like export revenues. So how then does it compare to other export revenues such as coffee, tobacco, gold, and oil? Here is my table taken from information readily available on the market. Oil in 2011 generated $294 billion in revenue. Tourism in 2014 generated 51.5. The diaspora in 2014 generated 61.8 billion. Tourism in 2014 generated 51.5 billion. Gold in 2012 generated 28.4 billion. Diamonds in 2013 generated 12 billion. Platinum in 2014 generated 8 billion. Tea in 2013 generated 3.4 billion, and then tobacco in 2014 generated 2.1 billion. Of the revenue sources above, only oil generates more revenue than the contributions of the diaspora through remittances. In fact, the contribution of the diaspora is double that of tobacco and gold combined, and remarkably, it is higher even than that of tourism. If you take Africa as a whole, the remittances income from diaspora, $62 billion, is greater even than the total foreign direct investments of $55 billion and the total foreign aid just above $50 billion. In some African countries, the income that comes from their citizens working in the diaspora is actually greater than what comes from export of major natural resources and agricultural production. Consider Uganda and Zimbabwe. For example, when we talk about tobacco in 2014, tobacco generated $14 million for Ugandan revenues, and it generated $960 million for the Zimbabwean revenue. Gold in 2012 generated $86 million in Ugandan revenue and $790 million in Zimbabwean revenue. Coffee in 2012 generated $452 million in Ugandan revenue and $10 million for Zimbabwean revenue. The diaspora in 2014 generated $1,001 million in Ugandan revenue and $3,500 million in Zimbabwean revenue. The overall GDP in 2013 for Uganda is $21,500 million and $13,500 million for the Zimbabwean revenues. So in some countries, including Uganda and Zimbabwe, remittances constitute a significant portion of GDP. In Lesotho, the figure is around 30%. Similarly, remittances to Egypt exceed the revenue from the Suez Canal, while in Morocco they are greater than tourism revenues. Even in Kenya, a global tourism hotspot, remittances in 2014 at $1.5 billion were quite close to tourism receipts in $1.8 billion. The income sent home by Africans in the diaspora is actually not 100% of their actual income. If you assume that these people are employed and that their remittances actually constitute, say, 20% of their net income, then they send home $62 billion every year out of the $310 billion net income that they earn whilst working abroad. If Africans working abroad were a country, then we would say their GDP is $310 billion. This compares favorably to the GDP of some very large countries in Africa, like Nigeria, whose GDP is $522 billion, Angola, whose GDP is $124 billion, Kenya, whose GDP is $55 billion. The contribution of the African diaspora to the foreign currency income of the African continent is quite extraordinary. As I have shown above, if you strip out oil revenues, diaspora remittances, money sent home by Africans working outside their countries, is greater than all the mineral exports and exports of agricultural cash crops like tobacco, cotton, coffee, and etc. etc. They send more home than all the foreign direct investors put together, and they send more money home than is earned from tourism. They send more money home than is received from foreign aid. Next time you see that waiter or construction worker working as a migrant worker, spare a thought for them. They are building two nations at the same time, even if they themselves do not know it. In my next post, I will look at how you can start a business back home, even whilst living in the diaspora. Starting or investing a business back home. 5 things you need to consider before starting. People who work and live in the diaspora are some of the hardest working people in the world. Sometimes they work on more than one job at a time. Many of them like to save money and start something at home, whilst others are simply looking for an investment opportunity which can give them a good return. If you are thinking of either starting a business back home or investing in an existing business, number 1, be clear about your motive. The first thing you must be clear about in your mind is the motive behind your decision. Some of the motives behind a decision to invest back home include the following: the need to reduce the burden of constantly sending money home, creating an opportunity for you to return home, creating a nest egg for when you retire and return home, getting a better return than what you think you can get where you are. Hey, I'm not here to judge your motive. All that I want you to know is that understanding your own motive and being honest about it will have a big role in the strategy you adopt and can be the difference between success and failure, along with so many other things I have spoken about before. Not every motive requires the same strategy for success. Some motives can lead to serious problems if you are not careful. Number 2, how much time do you have to spend on it? It is extremely important for you to have an honest assessment from the very beginning about how much time you can spend tending to the business back home. You have to always bear in mind that your current job or jobs demand a lot of time. You might also be far away in a country with different time zones or where it is very difficult to travel at short notice if there is a crisis in the business. Knowing how much time you are able to spend will help you evaluate the timing of the decision to start a business and, most importantly, the type of business you should do. Number 3, do your homework about the business environment back home. Prepare a proper business plan, study the market carefully, don't rush, be methodical. Remember, you worked hard for the money. Number 4, it always pays to get advice from others. Talk to others in the diaspora who are in business. Ask deep searching, well-researched questions. Talk to other business people back home. Don't rush. Be methodical. Remember, you worked hard for this money. Number 5, who is going to look after the business? You have worked hard for the money, so be careful and diligent about who you give responsibility for running the day-to-day affairs of the business. Don't mix up the need to have someone loyal with the need to have someone competent. Handing over your hard-earned money to an unemployed cousin simply because you trust him has left many people in tears. It's important to be professional about how you go about choosing someone to look after the venture, even if it's a relative. Should you start a business or just buy shares in an existing business? To start a business or to invest in a business? To start a business or to invest in a business? The skills that you require when you decide to start a business are very different from the skills you require when you're simply investing in an existing business started by someone else. It is harder to start a business and run it successfully, particularly if you live outside the country. You must be very cautious when doing this. Here are some few things that you need to think about if you are planning to start a business back home in your country. This is not intended to be exhaustive, but just to help you with your process. 1. How do you plan to fund it? If you're planning to use your savings, as most people in the diaspora do, don't overstretch yourself. By this I mean, don't put all your savings in the venture in one go. Start small and grow slowly. Even if you really know the business area you are going into, do not go into it with everything you have. If you are planning to borrow either where you are working or back home, be very careful and always keep at the top of your mind that you have to pay it back. 2. It is important to understand the business you're going into. Don't just wake up and say, so and so made money, so I will also try this. It must be something you fully understand better than anyone else. 3. Spread the risk. Even if you have all the money necessary, try and get some trustworthy partners who are also willing to invest something. As we say in business, get partners who are prepared to put some skill in the game. In other words, they must be prepared to risk their own money as well. If you get the wrong partners, it's game over. Choose carefully. 4. Find competent people to run it. In many ways, this is the toughest thing you will ever have to do. If you are really serious, the best thing to do is to go back home and run it yourself. I'm serious now, otherwise just invest. I will talk about that in the next post. 5. Be prepared to lose everything. You will not be a successful entrepreneur if you are not prepared to lose your investment. If the project falls over, don't behave as though the sky just fell on you. Laugh it off and learn from your mistakes. It is very much part of the game. Next time, you will be better. 6. Have proper reporting systems. Don't rely on spies. Systems to report are better than cousins hanging around the MD. I have spoken at great length before about the importance of numbers. Look for my posts in which I talk about the importance of managing by numbers. 7. Don't procrastinate. If you are going to do it, then do it. There is nothing more irritating than those people who talk endlessly about doing something and yet never doing anything about it. End of chapter 19.